Guys, today we are going to be sculpting a nude reclining figure, and I'm basically touching up the sculpture that I started already in a sculpture class, but I brought it home and I decided I wanted to put some finishing touches on it. You guys can tell that the sculpture is pretty rough and the head is going to be a focal point, so I wanted to push it a little bit and see what I could do. I'm just working on the structure of the face right here. And since she's a little bit a bigger woman, she's going to have a little bit more fat in her face. So I wanted to make it a little bit more round. Yes, I did do this from life. But, you know, when you're working on a sculpture, it just takes forever to finish. So now I'm using my imagination. Using a scraper tool, I kind of remove a little bit where I think should be less clay, and I wanted to work on the mouth, so I'm removing a little bit because I'm going to add a little bit because it's a little bit easier to add clay when things are this small for me. And the sculpture is very small. Like if you compare it to my hands, you can tell it's roughly like 14 inches in length, so not very big at all. One technique that I've learned is if you use the back of your tool, you can shape the clay a lot better. This is something I learned in the Art League in Alexandria. It seems like it's a pretty good technique to use in your sculptures. At one point I like to use scrape tools, like paint scrape tools, quite a bit, but that gave you a very hard edge. So if you have a roundness to the tool, it creates a more natural form to the sculpture. But even with the nose, you can tell it's very flat. I wanted to make the line where the cheek meets the lip. I'm carefully pointing in the nodes of the orbicularis oris, which is the lips. Where the lips meet at the corners is very important because if you push it down quite a bit, you'll get a little bit of a smile. And sometimes in sculptures, it might be nice to have a little bit of a smile. Here I am using that technique to create the roundness of the nose. Now I'm pushing the skin from the nose to the cheek, so it blends it a little bit better. At this point, looking from underneath up, I realized she needs a little bit more on the cheek and a little bit of the skull bone, which forms the eye socket. It's something that you have to kind of get used to looking at sculptures from underneath because oftentimes we just look at it at eye level. So it's very important to get off your feet and start looking around. After I finish a lot of the structure of the face and adding where all the bones are and where the cheeks are, I take a brush and I make it wet and I smooth things in order to see a more finished surface. But I don't generally use the brush for making a finished surface, but because the sculpture is so small, the brush makes it easy to push the clay around when dealing with a very small sculpture. I have to admit, I really like this technique of using the back of the tool to model the figure. If you can tell where I'm standing directly overhead of the sculpture and looking down. This is a pretty good vantage point. My sculpture stand actually moves down and I can stand and get a very good view of the sculpture. I think a lot of people kind of look at me with these very small tools and think I'm trying to do detail, but I'm really not. My goal is really to create a little bit of a idealistic sort of face. I'm not really going for detail. If you look at the face right here, There's not a lot of detail, but it has a general look in order for it to look as if it's finished. If I left it as it was when I left the class, it would just look like another study. So my goal in this sculpture is to push it so it looks a little bit more like a finished work. Spraying your clay is very important, especially if you're going to use a brush to push the clay around. And clay at this point is getting very hard and it's kind of warm, so it's important to keep it moist. I still have a lot of work to do in the back of the figure. As you can tell, all the geometry is there, but the hands and the hair need a lot of work. And I'm not quite sure what to do just yet. I might put the hair and hide a little bit of the fingers, or I might sculpt the hand the way I want it. But it really depends, and I'll see you in the next installment of this video.